There are few opportunities for a young isolated colony to form a sense of identity. But once New Zealanders began to venture out into the world, they were able to identify the qualities that still set us apart as Kiwis today. It happened most obviously when our young men left home to fight in faraway lands. And it happened when they flew the flag as rugby players on tour. This is about a time when they did both. In 1899, when the British went to war with the Dutch Afrikaner in South Africa, New Zealand was the first country to lend her support to the Empire. Prime Minister Richard Seddon was eager to impress the mother country with our loyalty. But the war itself did much to develop New Zealand's own identity. Compared to their British counterparts, the New Zealanders impressed as strong men who were mentally tough enough to handle the hardships of battle. The Times history of the war in South Africa concluded, the Kiwis were on average the best mounted troops in the war. Among the Boer War volunteers was Dave Gallagher. Gallagher epitomised colonial manhood, strong, rugged, brave, and of course, a rugby player. 3 years after the Boer War ended, Gallagher was chosen to captain the All Blacks on their legendary 1905 tour of Britain. The team that came to be known as the Originals thrashed Britain at their own game, amassing 830 points and conceding just 39. The team was welcomed home as heroes. New Zealanders revelled in newfound confidence, proud of their fighting independent spirit, yet still fiercely loyal to the British Empire. Less than a decade later, that loyalty would be put to the sternest of tests, this time not on the playing fields, but on the bloody battlefields of Europe. In August 1914, news came through that Great Britain had declared war on Germany. New Zealand followed suit immediately and set about raising an army to fight for king and country. 100,000 Kiwis served in that great war, many in the mud-filled trenches on the Western Front. In war, as in peace, rugby formed an integral part of the New Zealanders' lives. In fact, the New Zealand commanders encouraged it to foster a competitive, fighting spirit. In 1916, after the Battle of the Somme, a call went out in the New Zealand division for a rugby team to play other divisions of the Empire and against a French selection in Paris. The best players were sent back from the front, officially for instruction in bayonet fighting and bombing, although there was no doubt that the main focus was rugby. In front of a crowd of 25,000, the so-called Trench All Blacks thrashed the French 40 points to 0. But after the final whistle, it was back to the business of war. The team was disbanded and the players sent back to the trenches. At the outset of war, it was not unusual for rugby teams to sign up en masse to fight for king and country. Often they were posted to the same units, fighting together and dying together. In all, 18,000 New Zealanders made the ultimate sacrifice. Among them, the 1905 All Black captain, Sergeant Dave Gallagher. Following the armistice in November 1918, a New Zealand services team was selected to compete in the King's Cup between Allied nations. In the final, the Kiwis defeated the mother country and reaffirmed New Zealand's position as the best rugby-playing nation of the Empire. The Army side was then invited to play a series of games in South Africa on the way home. But its vice-captain, Sergeant Nathaniel Rungy Wilson, was left out of the team and stayed on the ship when it docked in Cape Town. A part West Indian, Wilson was the first New Zealand player dumped to appease South African racism. He was good enough to fight alongside the South Africans, but apparently not worthy to play sport with them. New Zealand remained a dominant force in world rugby for the next 2 decades. But by 1937, the kings of the game were without doubt South Africa.
Lochner breaks away, runs down to Taylor, sends to Babro, and Babro has a run in, scoring a try after the game has been in progress 6 minutes.
The Springboks comprehensively outplayed the All Blacks on home soil, leaving New Zealand eager to gain revenge in the scheduled tour of South Africa in 1940. But instead of doing battle on the rugby fields of Southern Africa, the majority of New Zealand's rugby elite found themselves tackling a far more formidable foe in the sands of Northern Africa. There was no shortage of Kiwis willing to defend the empire when she once again went to war with Germany.
Well, when we was going to school, I always remember we was taught about patriotism, the flag, the heroes of an older time. That was the theme of our lifestyle.
I joined in September 1939, you know, just straight after the war had started.
My mother was going to stop me, she was going to report me and, you know, all that. But there was quite a lot probably put their ages up. But I put my age up because Jim and Alec were joining with 2 mates, and I decided I'd join up with them.
Patriotism is love of country, and that's altogether alien to the passions of power and wealth. It knows nothing about greed or gain. It's just patriotism. Do something for the good of your country.
Just a few months ago, these men were working alongside of us in shops, factories, cowsheds and offices. Good workers and good friends. We might be talking to a man in the tram or in the pub one day and find him in uniform the next week, an Anzac. Civilian into soldier. It's an old story, but this time it is about us, and that makes it different. There is no goose-stepping here. Just the swinging stride of free men who have put on their working clothes and got into step for the biggest job ever tackled.
I said I'd serve in any capacity whatsoever. I didn't know one end of the army to the other, you see. So I said, that's what I'll do. I don't think anything else about it, except we thought, oh, it's a change of lifestyle, didn't know what we was going to get into. Perhaps I might have stayed home.
It is the adventuring of men going off to war. And under it all a grim purpose, a war to be fought by men who have the courage to say au revoir, when they know that for some of them, it must be goodbye.
Still they come. More Kiwis unload at a Middle East port to reinforce Freiburg's men. Pushing ashore on lighters is a crowded business, but the boys are glad to leave the ship and eager to stretch their legs on this desert they've heard about.
The New Zealand soldiers set up base in Mahdi under Lieutenant General Freiburg. The general was a popular figure amongst the troops, noted for his genuine interest in their welfare and a love of the game of rugby. Not that Egypt stood out as an obvious place to play, but these were adaptable Kiwis, and with Freiburg's encouragement, rugby soon became the sport of the desert. They swapped grass for sand and continued playing their national sport with undiminished enthusiasm.
It was quite funny, you never jibbed at it at all. You just said, oh, right, that's where we play and that's where we play. And you didn't go around looking for grass. You just took the 100 by 75 yards as pegged out by the locals, and that's where it was.
Freiburg saw many benefits in the game. Rugby was good for discipline and morale. It boosted fitness and relieved boredom. No doubt his commanding officers also saw the game as a wholesome distraction from the more dubious attractions of Cairo. Before long, teams were competing for honours in an inter-unit championship they called the Freiburg Cup. There was competition between the rugby-playing Allied forces too. Just 3 months after their arrival in Egypt, The Kiwis were playing an international against a British combined services team. The New Zealanders won the match by 20 points to 3. On the battlefield, however, things were not going quite so well. The Allied forces suffered heavy casualties in the early exchanges, none more so than at Crete. The Germans launched an unprecedented aerial and parachute assault. Outnumbered, outgunned, and with no air cover, losses for the exhausted Allies totalled over 15,000. Yet amongst all the death and chaos, there were times when humanity prevailed.
We was attacked on one Crete on one particular part, and Shorty, he said to me, "Come with me, Max, and get behind a bole of a tree. It's not very big." And I said, "No, there's a ditch over on our left here. I'm heading for there because there's more cover." Old Shorty, he had to stop the direct hit and he lost both legs. I said, "Right, I grabbed the stretcher, let's get Shorty down to casualty," which was a 300-yard through open country. And this spotter plane came around again. It's like a helicopter. They go at a very low speed. And the joker, not the pilot, the gunner, had the door open, and he's sitting there and he looked down at, and I gave him a cross between a salute and a wave, you know, sort of acknowledged the fact, and he could see that I had this gang of carrying a guy on a stretcher, and he just waved back to me. Never shot. Ah.
Crete was a major defeat for the Allied cause and a disaster for the Kiwi troops. 671 New Zealanders were killed. A further 967 were wounded, and over 2,000 became prisoners of war, including Max Simons.
Colonel said 2 junior officers and 4 other ranks will stay behind. We got 350 odd wounded in the caves, on the beaches, in tents. And when the Germans realise that what you've done for your fellow men, they most likely put you on a boat and send you back to Egypt. They put us on a boat, all right, and they took us back to Greece. And that wasn't very pleasant.
Aware that morale was low, Freyberg again turned to rugby. He attempted to arrange an impromptu international between South African and Kiwi troops, but was forced to postpone the match. Many of his star players had either been killed in action or required time to recuperate. It wasn't until some months later that the match finally took place. In front of the largest crowd ever to watch a rugby match at the Māori Sporting Club, the New Zealanders defeated a Springbok selection by 20 points to 9. There may have been a mutual respect for each other's soldiering abilities, but even in war, controversy is never far away when rugby is played between the two great rivals. Captaining the South African Forces team that day was Springbok great Louis Babro.
They cheated us. They brought on a substitution. We've never heard of that. And we knocked out their wing playing opposite an old Springbok Pat Lister, whom you wouldn't know. And on walks another player, and I said to Jack Sullivan, "What's all this?" He says, "That's how we play it in New Zealand."
This was not the only time the two nations fought out an international on the Egyptian sands. War and rugby were never more intertwined than immediately before the Battle of El Alamein.
On the Saturday, General Freyberg and General Montgomery asked that we stage a game behind the Alamein station, where was a big salt pan. And I said, "Well, what for?" He says, "We want to deceive the German reconnaissance planes. If they see us playing rugby, they won't expect us on Tuesday morning to attack them."
Not only did the game work as a perfect decoy, it caused some of the Germans to question the mental state of the Allies.
Recce planes did fly over. I see in a book by one of the German generals that he saw us, but we were fighting amongst ourselves, which amused everybody.
2 days later, under the cover of darkness, the decisive battle of Alamein began. The ensuing battle was the Allies' first major defeat of Rommel's forces and would prove to be a major turning point in the war in Africa. But again, the price would be high. Over 1,500 New Zealanders either lost their lives or were seriously wounded. When Rommel's forces were finally accounted for in northern Africa, the New Zealand troops turned their attention to the retreating Axis forces in Italy. The heat and desert sands of Egypt were replaced by Italian winters and mud. As in Egypt, organised rugby matches were played between the various battalions, as often as war would allow. Other matches, however, were played in rather more bizarre circumstances.
Rugby was a very popular game, a great morale booster anyhow. They'd play anywhere at all. And the best story I know about rugby football actually was in the foot of Mount Casino. And this story was told by Brigadier Fred Hansen. And he said that he was going around having a look at his men who were engineers, who were playing a game against the Free French, under conditions that were not happy conditions by any means. Not dangerous, but difficult. And the sidelines were made up with chaps and soldiers. No goalposts. But as he got closer, he was surprised to see they were not kicking the ball. Free French in their ordinary uniform, New Zealanders in their ordinary uniform. A good, hard game being played, but no, the ball not ever being kicked. Past, yes. Thrown in from the line out, yes. When he got close enough, he found they were playing not with a rugby football, but with a dead fowl. That's a true story.
Even in the German prisoner of war camps, the rugby spirit was alive and well. In various stalags, tournaments were organised amongst POWs, causing general bemusement amongst their captors.
The Germans couldn't quite understand these mad people playing like they did. There was one occasion where one of our boys sort of gave me the elbow and I landed up bashing into the German commandant and our officers, so I had the special seats from the side so that they could privilege, you know. And I went, and all I heard was, ach, mein Gott, Himmel, and kranken means they're sick. Yeah, I didn't give a continental about him.
Despite the fact the Allies had gained the upper hand in Italy, staunch German resistance thoroughly tested the Kiwis' resilience. But the New Zealanders' reputation as being one of the finest fighting soldiers in the war was firmly intact.
The New Zealanders were the greatest soldiers we had ever encountered, not only for discipline, appearance, that their will to succeed in whatever place they had to take, you know, and we were deeply, deeply impressed by them, which I still am to this day.
Kiwis make good soldiers because there's no tomorrow, you know, and this is how we live generally. I didn't ever think of getting killed. It was always the other guys that were getting killed. It's always the other fella. And so you go about doing your thing. You get the odd shock, of course, and some of your mates do get knocked off. But I can recall when I was wounded, we'd gone to come under fire, went to the ground, got up, did a charge, and I got wounded. So I'm lying in the suite, and I was laughing, and the stretcher bearer came along and he started slapping my face. I said, "Lay off it, Lou, what the hell?" He said, "You've gone round the bloody twist." I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "What the hell are you laughing at?" I said, "What a bum shot that bastard was."
During the Italian campaign, over 2,000 New Zealanders lost their lives, while a further 6,000 were wounded. For the able-bodied, rugby was seen as a welcome distraction from the harsh realities of combat.
Immediately you're into another world going onto a rugby field. Well, I've always felt that way anyhow, and I think it was a totally thing outside of war.
For the New Zealanders in Italy, the football season opens with a tournament for the Freiburg Cup. Every sizable paddock behind the lines becomes a bit of New Zealand as men dressed in familiar Saturday afternoon jerseys take time off from fighting to handle a football again. For start of season games, the pace is fast, and slow teams are soon eliminated in the playoffs. There's a record crowd at the Fawley Stadium for the final, when the 22nd Battalion played the Ammunition Company. The 22nds are the ones in the white jerseys. Outstanding feature of the play is the superb handling of the greasy ball. They certainly make footballers tough in New Zealand.
In December of 1944, General Freiburg himself was on hand to present the 22nd Battalion with the cup that bears his name. It would be the last official rugby tournament played during the war. VE Day, and peace in Europe is greeted with a combination of relief, reflection, and wild celebration. Over 11,000 New Zealanders had given their lives in battles fought in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. The casualties on a per capita basis were the highest of any Allied country except Russia. Thousands had been injured in their fight for freedom, but no one understood the meaning of freedom more than the liberated POWs.
It was nice. Played up a little bit, but it doesn't matter, eh? Not bad. What's 4 or 5, 5 or 6 beers? That's nothing much in it. That's all I'm telling you.
When the Japanese finally surrendered some months after peace in Europe, rugby and the military could have again parted company. But the war's end gave birth to the greatest military rugby team of them all. Freiburg's dream of a post-war tour of the United Kingdom by a services rugby team was about to become a reality. Player nominations were called for from all available units in Egypt and Italy. Preliminary trials were held in Austria, from which 61 players were sent to England for a further series of matches. The final trials were held in Margate, nowadays a slightly tired-looking seaside town on England's southern coast. But for a group of battle-weary soldiers in 1945, Margate represented the chance to be part of something special.
To make a team like that, and of course we all knew about the 1919 Army team and how they were still, you know, revered in our annals of rugby history. And, you know, a chance to see a bit more of the world, and hell, the war's over and we're alive.
Despite many of the players having been away from loved ones for a number of years, that welcome home would have to wait. Competition for the final places was fierce.
It always was going to be a wonderful tour. You know, there wasn't one trialist who would not have been disappointed had he missed out.
With the exception of their captain, Major Charlie Saxton, who'd been a pre-war All Black, and a handful of provincial players, the final 30 selected was virtually a group of no-names. They were hardly expected to set the rugby world alight. Tour manager Colonel Alan Andrews was charged with the job of ensuring the team achieved their rather lofty objectives: to revive interest in rugby in Britain, to aid services charities, and to play bright, open rugby.
He was an outstanding man, the Colonel. The team spirit was outstanding. We were opponents, like the fullbacks, the wingers and all that thing, but there was such an incredible togetherness all the time.
Rank didn't come into it. We're all Tom, Dick and Harry. So, even though there was a captain and a major and all that sort of thing, it was always first names came out.
They were liberated, weren't they? In fact, some were literally liberated straight from prison camp, but others had had all the discipline obviously enforced upon them by the military regime, and now they were playing with officers that were treating them like muckers, and it got on well. They were happy, really happy.
Team captain and coach was Major Charlie Saxton, a man whose philosophy on the game of rugby was light years ahead of its time.
We believed in attack was the best method of defence, or we were taught that way by Charlie. And the Kiwis, to me, running rugby, everybody running onto the ball at pace. The old story, position, possession and pace.
The tour proper kicked off in the most difficult manner with a game against Swansea. The Welsh club side had defeated the All Blacks in 1935 and were expected to easily account for the Kiwis. But this team of soldiers surprised everybody by thrashing the Welshmen by 22 points to 6. Word soon got out that this side was something special. The crowds started to flock. With their exciting brand of running rugby, the Kiwis easily won their opening 3 games in Wales. They were even too strong for the best that Rugby League had to offer. This game at Leeds featured 12 British League internationals. Again, Saxton's adage of possession, position and pace was put to good use, and the Kiwis won comfortably by 14 points to 7.
It's right on the halfway mark at the moment. Now here is Simpson again, throws it out on this side. Smith gets the ball and gives it to Argus, and this is where New Zealand get their first try. Nearly, because Argus put his foot into touch that time, but from a similar movement a few minutes later, here it comes. It's out to Dobson. Dobson takes it, and he passes it to Smith. Smith gives it to Dobson. Watch Dobson push that winger off him. If he gets to the 25, he in-passes now to Dobson, and watch him streak for the line and score the first try for New Zealand.
Back home, interest in the tour was also growing, helped in no small part by the enthusiastic match calling of Winston McCarthy.
10 yards outside New Zealand's 25. Proctor gets it, gives it out to Kearney. Kearney gives it on to Allen. Allen's racing up now to make an overlap, and he in-passes to Smith, and Smith is caught by Matthews. Oh, goodness gracious, things are going to happen here today.
His voice became a household voice. His voice became synonymous with the Kiwis. His commentaries were just electrifying. I think Winston McCarthy could make a dull game look like a real cliffhanger.
New Zealand clinging to their slender lead of 3 points into this line-out, right in the middle again. New Zealand forward coming out the dart, picks it up, gets it out to Cleaver. But Cleaver misses, so Jack Matthews, there's a new...
McCarthy went on to become New Zealand's most famous rugby broadcaster, although his exuberance was at times a bit much for British listeners.
He killed one fella died of a heart attack in Wales, some old guy, but he really used to liven the game up, and he was good company too. He was quite a funny little man.
The Kiwis marched on undefeated in their first 6 games, but this perfect record was expected to come to an end when the team lined up against a full English international side on Twickenham. The English team had demoralised the All Blacks in 1935, and their supporters were confident they would do the same to the Kiwis. The Kiwis themselves were far from overconfident.
Twickenham, for the first time was unbelievable, it was like stepping onto a spring, and the ground seemed so thick. It was lovely feeling, and we were probably a little in awe. We weren't quite sure how it was going to turn out, but then of course we started pretty well and carried on.
I was there. I was not a replacement because you didn't have them in those days, but I was reserve in case somebody fell down before they got onto the pitch, and they often did, but they didn't on this occasion, and we got stuffed, and rightly so.
In front of a packed Twickenham crowd, the Kiwis stunned the English with a ruthless display of forward dominance and running rugby. The English failed to cross the New Zealanders' line, while the Kiwis scored 3 tries and came close on numerous occasions. By the time the final whistle sounded, the Kiwis had well and truly avenged the All Black loss of 35 and had thrashed England by 18 points to 3. Although the tour was essentially a celebration of peace and freedom, The battered landscape was a constant reminder of how terribly the British people had suffered during the war years.
You know, they got hammered. When civilians get hammered like that with bombing, they can't answer back, they can't retaliate. It must have been bloody hellish for them.
It was just unreal. I mean, you've got to admire the British, I mean, for their guts and integrity. There's no way they give in, even though we criticise them and that. I think they're a great race.
Following the defeat of the English team, it was obvious to all rugby followers that the Kiwis were much more than just an army rugby side. They were playing rugby football of the highest international standard and soon found local determination to defeat them growing more intense. This was especially true when the team returned to Wales.
Once you got over the Severn River and you got into Wales and the train had to slow down for any particular reason, there were always workers on the sideline there and they'd say, you beat Swansea, but they're only a pack of boys. Wait till you meet Cardiff. Cardiff will beat you. Cardiff will beat you. And we caught this all the time. You beat Swansea, but they're only a pack of boys. Wait till you meet Cardiff. Cardiff will beat you. And so they went on about each team that we'd beaten. They were only a pack of boys. Wait till we meet Cardiff. Wait till we meet Cardiff.
The locals had reason to feel confident. The Cardiff side was a strong one, featuring two stars of Welsh and Lions rugby, Bleddyn Williams and Dr. Jackie Matthews. Both men have vivid memories of a match that will always be remembered for a missed kick.
We had a marvellous game here against the Cardiff, and they won by a try to nil by Jim Kearney, scored the try. And we could have drawn the game, and it was an extraordinary thing. We were given the penalty right in front of the post. And we had a hooker who would take the short kicks, and Bill Tamplin was the great goal kicker, took the long kicks. So Maldwin then took this kick and missed the kick. So we lost the game. We could have drawn it in the last minute of the game.
Kickers can miss from in front, you know. Their nerves get at them. But I'm not too sure that happened on this occasion.
Over the years, it's been suggested that the miss was in some way a charitable gift to the Kiwi side. But playing the game in good spirit is one thing. Handing over a win is a completely different matter.
Well, I happened to be the captain that day, and I know. And I said, Maldwin, you better have this in front of the post. I said, come on, we've got to get this. No, and it was a complete miss. Didn't even think of losing a game. And we weren't paid even then.
The disused chimney stacks and mine shafts that now litter the landscape of the Welsh valleys are a sad reminder of a bygone era. But when the Kiwis prepared to face Wales at Cardiff Arms Park, the mines dominated Wales' economy and miners dominated her rugby.
It wasn't the Welsh of today, it was the Welsh of the past, the Welsh of history. The miners were there with their black faces. They'd come out of the coal mines, hadn't had time to have a wash, and they were all there around the ground.
The Welsh are a naturally hardy breed. With the conditions that existed in post-war Wales, they needed to be.
It's like everywhere else, it was austerity everywhere, and the food was rationed even then, you see. So it wasn't all that clever. And with the jersey we played in, we had to hand them back because they were on coupons. And we didn't get an official Welsh jersey until 1947, strange enough. And even then we had to hand them back.
The jersey may have been on loan, but its significance and the significance of the match was not lost on the Welsh people.
There's a full house here. There was over 50,000 here for that game. And it wasn't an All Black play, but it looked All Black. And they played like All Blacks. So that was the main attraction. And bearing in mind also, that people throughout the war years have been really starved of rugby of this standard, you see. So the interest was there.
Great interest centred round the rugger match between Wales and the Kiwis. Mr. Peter Fraser was there, obviously proud of his countryman's unbeaten record. The question now is this: could the Kiwis do what the All Blacks had twice failed to do pre-war and beat Wales at Cardiff?
The match was a typically torrid affair, although the Kiwi backs almost scored on a number of occasions.
Away go the New Zealand backs again. Allen throws a beautiful dummy. He kicks now over the full back's head, but New Zealand very nearly score again on the blind side. Away goes Smith now. He breaks through a tackle.
Despite having the better of the game, the New Zealanders found themselves down with just 15 minutes remaining. Jim Sherritt then scored arguably the most famous try of the tour.
5 yards inside his 25, and Sherritt picked it up. And Sherritt racing down the line. He's up to the 25. He's going to score a try. Sherritt's going to score a try, and he's going to score it behind the post.
I had a bit of a reputation for being, oh, there's old dopey Sherritt, half asleep and so on. But I realised the possibilities that arose when that kick wasn't going to find touch. And then I was going flat stick, everyone was standing still, and it was just a piece of cake. Everybody's still and I'm racing, you know, just left them behind as though they weren't there. And that made, you know, the scoring the try pretty easy.
That was a great victory. I'll never forget playing against Bledden Williams and Dr. Jackie Matthews and those guys. They were great players. And we really excelled ourselves in Wales. And, you know, in places like Llanelli and Newport and Swansea, we had some great games in Wales. Never forget those games.
Despite the historic victory over Wales at Cardiff Arms Park, the tour was not without its disappointments. The Kiwis went into the test match against Scotland as firm favourites and even scored the first try.
Barged his way over, right through man after man, and scored just by the corner. And New Zealand lead by 3 points.
But the Scots scored 3 of their own and the Kiwis went down 11 points to 6.
And Anderson will go over and score a grand try. Here's the movement from another angle.
Although many of the team were suffering from the flu, no excuses are given for the loss.
It was just one of those things in Scotland. The Scottish side played exceptionally well, but oh no, all in all, Scotland deserved to have beaten us, I think.
They may have dropped the test to Scotland, but the Kiwis remained the darlings of the English press and social set. Everywhere they went, there were formal engagements with Lord Mayors and local dignitaries. Perhaps no other sporting side from New Zealand has been accorded quite the same treatment. Such was their popularity, the side even attracted royal attention and were invited to meet the King and Queen at Buckingham Palace. And there was also time for a pilgrimage to the Rugby.
I can still visualise us run there, a photo grouped around, play as a soccer down.
Importantly, towns in Britain. Their mission of having British rugby bright open and parity been achieved. After a well-earned post-tour break, the Kiwis set sail for New Zealand. Despite not having played for a number of months, the team rather reluctantly agreed to play a further 5 matches on home soil.
It's a grand day for a grand game. Post-war football has begun.
The home crowds turned out in force, and the Kiwis didn't disappoint, playing their special brand of high-speed, high-entertainment football. They may have dropped their final game to Wellington, but it meant little. The legend of the Kiwis was by now firmly entrenched into New Zealand rugby folklore. Incredibly, 16 of the team went on to become All Blacks. Individual brilliance abounded. But the Kiwis weren't about individuals. This was a team in the true sense of the word, a team of soldiers. In 1997, their achievements were formally recognised when the entire team was inducted into the New Zealand Sporting Hall of Fame.
It was the best team I ever played with. I thought that the team deserved it, and it was great to get the recognition. And I'll never forget that there was about, I suppose, 10 or a dozen of us down there in Dunedin, and we were then invited at the induction to go up onto the stage, and the last person to be called was the Colonel. And when he marched across that floor and up onto the stage, we felt real proud, real proud.
The Kiwis' manager, Colonel Alan Andrews, who later rose to the rank of Brigadier, died in February 2003. Marching proudly alongside his casket, paying their final respects, were his comrades in arms, his teammates. The Kiwis were a warm-spirited, entertaining and supremely gifted rugby team. The horrific world events that had drawn them together were seldom brought up in conversation, but they will never be forgotten.
Nasty experience. You know, we don't like talking about it at times. Nasty. And we wouldn't want to see that again. We wouldn't want to see that again.